My name's Brandon and this is Cartoon Network Video Game History, a show where I take a look back on all of the video games based on Cartoon Network shows and retrospectively review them. For the fifth and so far final time, I'm reviewing a Cartoon Network crossover game. On the agenda this week is Cartoon Network Battle Crashers.
Castle Bashers.
Right off the bat, this game raises red flags. There are two different release dates listed for this game. The most commonly referenced release date is November 8, 2016, which is cited by Metacritic, basically every review I've seen, and in general, this seems like the actual release date. Throwing a spanner in the works is the November 3 release date I saw listed. Where did I see this? On a shady website down a dark alley? Nope, this is the date listed by the game's goddamn press kit. The literal guide put together to market Battle Crashers,
Castle Bashers,
seems to be unable to list the correct release date. If that isn't a perfect summary of Cartoon Network's video game history, then I don't know what is. We're well and truly into next gen now, with Battle Crashers releasing on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, with a 3DS version sneaking in too. While it seemed to skip the Wii U, it would eventually arrive on the Nintendo Switch in October of 2017. The developer in charge of the first crossover since Punch Time Explosion was Magic Pockets, a newcomer to Cartoon Network video game history. Magic Pockets are a development studio based in Paris who have been around since 2000. They have an extensive history developing licensed games, making heavy hitters like Ant's Extreme Racing, as well as titles based on Catwoman, Harry Potter, Bakugan, and Ninja Turtles. As has become the norm recently, there were two different publishers for Battle Crashers.
Castle Bashers.
In North America, the game was published by Game Mill Entertainment, while in Europe, publishing was handled by Maximum Games. I'm wagering that a lot of you are aware of this, but in case you didn't know, Battle Crashers is incredibly infamous. Upon release, it was absolutely destroyed by critics, even more than a usual Cartoon Network game would be. Generally, most of the games I review here hover around the 4 to 6 average review score. Battle Crashers, on the other hand, its average review rating is a 2 out of 10 across all 4 versions. Off the top of my head, I'd say that is the most overwhelmingly negative reception to any Cartoon Network game ever. The most positive reviews I could find for the game were from Switch Player and Nintendo Life, who both gave the game a 4. Not great signs when your so-called positive reviews top out at a 4. The majority of the other reviews fall between a 3 and a 2, but there are a couple of 1.5s and 1s thrown in for good measure. I've played some utter trash over the course of this series, ranging from games that are lazy, cheap, and just unenjoyable to play, to games that have been downright broken. Despite all that, I've never reviewed a game that has been so utterly and thoroughly destroyed. Could Cartoon Network Battle Crashers be the worst Cartoon Network game of all time? But before I get to the bottom of this mess, it's that time again where I remind you all to subscribe. Want to see me review Samurai Jack Battle Through Time? Want to see me review every single Nickelodeon game ever made? Well, unless you're subscribed, you're going to miss out on all of that and more. But now, on with the review. As I mentioned at the top of the episode, Battle Crashers is the fifth and so far final Cartoon Network crossover. While the previous iterations have mostly focused on crossing over shows from different eras of Cartoon Network, this one handles things a bit different. No, you won't find Dexter's Lab or Kids Next Door characters here, but that's not because the developer has randomly chosen to exclude them, like some other Cartoon Network crossovers. Instead, Battle Crashers is clearly focused on crossing over and promoting the slate of shows Cartoon Network was airing back in 2016. The shows featured here are Adventure Time, Gumball, Regular Show, Steven Universe, Clarence, and Uncle Grandpa. It's the perfect summary of what Cartoon Network was at the time. Some people might be a little disappointed by this choice, but I actually don't mind it. Without a crossover game like this, shows such as Gumball or Clarence were never going to get any proper video game representation. Gone are the days of the 90s or early 2000s where you could just pump out games based on every show you were airing. Heck, Regular Show only got a single video game despite being so popular, so overall I like this creative choice for Battle Crashers. By focusing entirely on the current slate of shows, the game also avoids the pitfall many other crossovers have fallen into. I'd argue every notable Cartoon Network show of the time is represented here. The one exception is probably We Bare Bears. The premiere of We Bare Bears was about a year and a half before this game came out, so it probably could have been included, but for the life of me I cannot picture them being included in this kind of game. As for playable characters, well, you're pretty much limited to the main characters of those shows. There's no left field or fan favourite side characters for you to unlock. Not only is Battle Crashers notable for focusing entirely on current shows, but it's also notable compared to other crossovers for a different reason. In the past, crossovers have been entirely focused on copying a beloved Nintendo party game franchise. We've seen takes on Mario Kart, Mario Party, and Super Smash Bros. Over at the rival channel, Nickelodeon had taken a different approach, crossing over their characters in the Nicktoons Unite games, which weren't just cashing in on the popularity of Nintendo's games.
My God, you're greasy.
For the first time ever, Cartoon Network has done a similar thing. As you could probably glean from the title, Battle Crashers is heavily inspired by Castle Crashers.
Castle Crashers.
For those of you too young to remember, Castle Crashers was one of the first big success stories on Xbox Live Arcade. However, that was back in 2008. It's now 8 years later at the time of this game's release, so it seems a little weird to be copying its style. Battle Crashers sees you take control of one of Cartoon Network's heroes as you beat your way through scores of enemies. The game does have a cooperative element, with up to 4 players able to jump in at one time, but this cooperative element is non-existent in single player. Instead, you're able to rotate through characters at will by pressing L1 or R1. Usually in an arcadey game like this, I'd expect characters to play almost identically, with the major difference coming down to the type of attacks or abilities each one can use. Battle Crashers is a little different though, in that each character has a set of stats. Depending on who you choose, you'll see a difference in attacking power, defensive ability, and movement speed. All of this goes alongside the typical varieties of attacks and abilities. However, after booting this game up for the first time, none of this matters. You can only choose Clarence to start things off, so stats aren't going to be too much of a concern to you. You'll soon find yourself with a bunch more characters to play with though, as about 5 seconds into the first level you start unlocking characters at a rapid pace, which are then immediately available. This is kind of a weird design choice, but what I do like is that you basically unlock all of the characters who haven't been featured in a video game yet first. Mordecai and Rigby, Steven, and Finn and Jake are saved till last, meaning you get plenty of time to experiment with Clarence, Gumball, and Uncle Grandpa before you inevitably fall back into those favourites. As I mentioned, characters have unique attacks and abilities. Each character gets 3 of these to be exact, but you'll notice you only start off with 1. This is your basic attack, but as you progress you'll unlock a super attack that is tied to a meter that slowly refills, as well as some type of traversal ability which is also tied to the same meter. To fully power up your team of Cartoon Network heroes you'll need to collect gems, which spill out onto the battlefield as you defeat enemies and destroy random objects, naturally. You'll also stumble across occasional bonus areas and levels, which are always a great source of extra gems. These gems might seem a bit pointless while playing through the first level, but upon completion you're taken to a progression screen where these gems are converted into experience. One of the great things about being able to switch characters on the fly is that you can ensure that no character is left behind. Too often in games like this, I find that the first character you pick is the character you use forever, because all the other characters just fall too far behind in levels and experience. Thankfully, that's not the case at all in Battle Crashers. Each level you gain, you'll grab a new ability, so after just a couple of levels you'll be fully powered. I was less than halfway through the game when I had fully upgraded not just one or a few of the characters, but the entire roster. Not only do characters have unique attacks that are tailored to their personalities, but their attacks also have special uses. For example, Gumball can use his vacuum attack to blow away bad smells, while Steven can destroy enemy shields in an instant. It's a neat idea, but completely undercooked. You never actually need to use these extra abilities, and in many cases, it's easier if you don't. I also found that a lot of the characters had very dull attacks. Steven in particular has the most basic ass attack I've ever seen. Combat becomes a massive chore when the attacks available to you aren't satisfying to pull off. Overall, the actual combat itself is dull, repetitive, and way too basic. There is absolutely no depth to what is on display in Battle Crashers. You just spam attack after attack on the many waves of enemies without much thought. It's the definition of mindless gameplay. This doesn't necessarily mean the overall game has to be awful though. I've played a number of Ben 10 games that don't have stellar combat systems, but they make up for it in other ways. Having interesting or well thought out levels can often be a good way to combat this. Unsurprisingly, Battle Crashers doesn't feature any of that. The layout of this game is 2 regular levels and then 1 boss battle level per show. Boss battles are always the same thing. Some enemy sits in the middle of the screen and you just spam attacks at it. You literally don't need to do anything other than smash the attack button in these situations, because each character has a separate life bar. Because of this, and how many characters you have at your disposal, every boss can be defeated by standing in one place and just overwhelming it by sheer weight of numbers. I will admit, the regular levels do seem to have a bit more thought put into them. A good example are the levels in the Gumball world. Both of these play off the idea of everything taking place inside a school. The first level has you fighting to survive until the school bell, rather than defeating waves and moving on. It's a war of attrition, with the idea being that you just need to hold on. Handled correctly, this would be a blast and a great change of pace. Instead, it well and truly overstays its welcome. The level ends up taking like twice as long as a regular level and just ends up feeling tedious the longer it lasts for. The next level is set in a library, and because you're supposed to be quiet inside of libraries, that plays into the level. Every time you attack, this sound meter is supposed to raise, with the idea being if you attack in rapid succession, it will fill and you'll be penalized. It doesn't work though, or at the very least, it's very inconsistent. So many times I was spamming moves like crazy, and the meter was barely moving. Even when I did fill the meter with other attacks that made sound more reliably, the only penalty is that the librarian shushes you and you freeze for a split second. Kinda renders the gimmick a little useless. I actually think the Gumball world is a pretty good summary of Battle Crashes as a whole. Yeah, the idea and premise are solid and you could definitely squeeze something good out of it. But because of the extremely poor execution, it just ends up a mess. Almost every time the developers stray away from bog standard beat 'em up gameplay, they inadvertently end up making the game way worse. Look at this section where you run away from a gust of wind. Could be a nice little change up in a level, right? Well, in any other game, this would be a brief section. In Battle Crashes, it stretches on and on forever. Similarly, the second last level is a maze. Developers really need to stop doing this shit. I don't think I have ever played a maze level in any game that wasn't the absolute very worst part of the overall experience. Personally, to me it feels like Magic Pockets aren't very strong at putting together a cohesive game. This is shown pretty blatantly in the final boss battle. So you have the ability to jump from the get-go here, but you basically never have to use it. There's no platforming, no bottomless pits to jump over, nothing. Then all of a sudden in the very final moments of the game, you're presented with a boss battle that is almost entirely focused on platforming. It's just completely baffling. It's like the ultimate form of my complaint about games that introduce a completely new mechanic or gameplay style for the final boss. To make things even worse, platforming controls in Battle Crashes are hot garbage. Earlier I praised Battle Crashes for choosing to just feature the current shows of the time. In my opinion, this works rather well as the shows get their chance to shine. However, things started to feel weird early on. Alarm bells started ringing when, while playing through Clarence's levels, I only encountered enemies from Adventure Time. I would have assumed that the world of each show would feature specific enemies from those shows, but then I thought maybe they've jumbled them up or something. But as I played on further, it became increasingly obvious that there just weren't many enemies in the game. There are like maybe 5 enemy characters throughout the entire game, almost all of which come from Steven Universe or Adventure Time. I get that those two shows are quite action focused, with the other shows being mostly comedy, but if you can somehow make enemies for Ed, Edd and Eddy to face, then it shouldn't be too hard here. Heck, Regular Show had its own game, and I'm pretty sure there are 0 enemies to represent Regular Show here. Maybe it seems minor, but this turned out to be the canary in the coal mine for just how fucking cheap and lazy this game is. Firstly, the story of this game is basically non-existent. Look, I'm not asking for an Oscar-worthy narrative out of a Cartoon Network crossover game, but I'd like for there to be some reason why these shows have crossed over. This game features exactly 2 cutscenes, one at the beginning and one at the end. These are laughably low budget. Like, the cutscenes honestly seem like a bad parody of South Park's arts and crafts animation style that was used in its early seasons. It's just so janky. The fact that there are only 2 cutscenes in the game and they are this bad is astounding. There's also no voice acting whatsoever. Not a single spoken word is uttered by anyone in this game. You don't even get any recycled sound bites from the characters during gameplay. This sucked in Punch Time Explosion, but at least that game put some effort into the narrative and had narration. Battle Crashes has none of that. I know it's probably a massive pain in the ass to try and get all the voice actors to record stuff, but you really couldn't rip some sound bites to spice things up? This criticism gets thrown around constantly, but it's incredibly apt here. Battle Crashes looks and feels like a Flash game. Visually, it doesn't seem to be anything that I haven't seen before on CartoonNetwork.com. I might sound harsh, but this is one of the worst looking Cartoon Network games I've seen in recent memory. Similarly, the gameplay isn't any more advanced than Flash games I would have played as a kid. It's just wild that this wasn't something released on Cartoon Network's website. I think where the game seems the cheapest is in just how much repeating and backtracking you're forced to do. More often than not, I roll my eyes when a game does this, because it usually reeks of padding. Generally, the devs try to disguise this with narrative stuff or by altering the level in some way. Battle Crashes doesn't even think about lifting a finger in an attempt to disguise this. By the end of the game, you've basically replayed every regular level at least once. The worst offender is when you get up to the last level, but the game stops you and tells you that you need to collect a bunch of random shards before you can end things. This forces you to replay 5 levels. I don't really mind the length of Battle Crashes, but don't make me basically play every single level twice as part of the main campaign. I guess they kind of try and jazz things up by forcing you to play these levels in different difficulty modes. However, it's kind of strange that a lot of these replays are in the game's easiest mode. Like, you play the game in a mode literally titled normal, but then end up redoing these levels in a mode that constantly regenerates your health, making it impossible to die. Why? What could possibly be the point of this other than to pad the game's length? Why am I unlocking this mode after beating levels? Shouldn't this be available from the start? Eventually you have to start replaying levels on a harder difficulty, which is just as annoying. Nothing has changed about these levels other than the fact that they take longer. The icing on the cake is that these new difficulty modes put this ghastly visual effect around the screen. Nothing screams fun change up of gameplay like making the screen look as unappealing as possible. Once you collect all the shards, you're then awarded with the joy and satisfaction of having to play through the maze level again. Cartoon Network Battle Crashes is genuinely one of the cheapest and laziest games I have ever played. There are vast amounts of Flash games that have had more care and effort put into them. I guess I should have known from the moment I purchased the game. The game's file size is 142.54 meg. I literally did a double take when I saw this. No way it could be that small, right? For comparison, Steven Universe Attack the Light is 326.2 meg. I know it's not a perfect comparison, but it seems kinda crazy that Attack the Light is well over 2 times the size of Battle Crashes and can be purchased for pocket change, yet this game is like $25 on the PlayStation Store. I was lucky in that there was a 75% sale on when I bought it, so I only paid around $6, but I would be furious if I paid full price for this. I'm being extremely harsh, but I hope it doesn't come off as me putting all the blame on the developers. Personally, I think Cartoon Network is mostly, if not entirely, to blame for this. I really don't think any developers set out to make a cheap and lazy and poorly received game. I guess Magic Pockets could have seen this as an easy payday and decided to push it out with minimal effort. However, I'd say it's far more likely that Cartoon Network gave a tiny indie developer in France a minuscule budget to work with, and this is what they could come up with. Magic Pockets have nothing to gain from releasing a title that can barely score a review above 2 out of 10. Regardless of who's to blame, the end product is a hot mess. Man, I'm really bummed out. While Cartoon Network Speedway and Block Party were big disappointments, it felt like we were trending in the right direction with Racing and Punch Time Explosion. Those games felt like they respected the heritage of Cartoon Network, and were solid from a gameplay perspective to boot. Battle Crashes does have some solid ideas, but the execution is a big miss. It also doesn't help that it's a game clearly made on a shoestring budget. It's hard enough to make a regular game with minuscule money, but I'd imagine a title featuring like half a dozen different shows makes things even more difficult. Because of this, Battle Crashes is a serious contender for the worst game I have ever played, purely because of how lazy and cheap it feels. If this was 2007 and I was sitting in my grade 6 computer lab class and this was a Flash game on CartoonNetwork.com, I guarantee you this is something I would have played for 5 minutes and then discarded for good. It sucks that I can't even come up with a single bit of praise that doesn't have a caveat to it. Unfortunately, I think Block Party has been dethroned as the worst Cartoon Network crossover game. Again, I want to reiterate that I'm not putting this all at the feet of the developers. I despise when clueless internet critics just call everything lazy. Very rarely are video game developers lazy. Obviously, I don't have all the facts, but from my point of view, it seems like they were dealt a bad hand from Cartoon Network, and this is all they could muster up. Next week, things will hopefully be a little more positive. It's the return of Ben 10. The reboot is in full swing, so naturally the video game series had to be rebooted too. This is actually the first time in Cartoon Network video game history that I'm reviewing a game that I've played previously. While I obviously do have pre-existing thoughts on the game, I'm very keen to jump into it again and see if my opinion has changed at all several years later. To catch that review and all of my future videos, make sure you're subscribed to Cartoon Review.
Castle Bashers.